direction. It's okay if it goes a little backwards a little bit, as long as it generally moves in one direction. That's good. And so that's peristalsis. And so that helps get food from our esophagus all the way to our rectum. You'll see peristalsis all the way through. And it always happens in the presence of food, in the presence of a bolus, some kind of chyme there, you're going to see peristalsis. When there's no food or no object in your GI tract, you're not going to see peristalsis. And peristalsis only happens in the seconds interval. The next type of motility, it doesn't actually really move anything in a kind of a displacement manner. It's more mixing. And so we call this kind of movement segmental contractions. Segmental contractions are basically, it's the same idea. Certain parts of the GI tract are contracting, but we alternate what parts are contracting. And so it creates a sloshing motion, right? You took your otter pop from both ends and you kind of press down on either end. You have this kind of moving back and forth of whatever's inside your otter pop packet, right? And so that's kind of the idea of segmental contractions. Segmental contractions are basically alternating contractions around the GI tract just to slosh around the chyme, slosh around the food, to mix it. And mixing is a good point because remember, not only did we put food into our GI tract, but we're putting enzymes, we're putting acid in there. And so we want that to mix all together so we can have nice mix of reactions essentially with our food. And so segmental contractions help with this process, helps mix things around. Yeah.
In the stomach, what is occurring, peristalsis or segmental?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, both. And same thing with the small intestines. You see both occurring too. You actually see both very often when you're digesting one, mixing, and eventual movement. Yes?
I mean, segmental contraction, that doesn't necessarily move down the system, though, right?
Well, that's the beauty of it. You have multiple smooth muscle layers, right?
Right.
What smooth muscle layers do we have to our GI tract? There's two. You guys remember your anatomy? We have two smooth muscle layers in our GI tract. What are they? They have two different names. They're part of the muscularis tunica. Oh, you're making your anatomy teacher sad today. One layer is called circular, right? Other one's called longitudinal. Circular and longitudinal. Longitudinal. And so we have two different layers of smooth muscle, and those are going to be responsible for basically two different types of movement, right? The circular is going to help with mixing, while the longitudinal, when it contracts, it helps push food down the tract. And so that's why we have two. The stomach has a third one called oblique, which helps with more mixing, but we're going to ignore that one for now. But yeah, that's how you can do both, because you have two different muscle layers and they're arranged differently, so when they contract, they can basically provide two types of movement. We good? All right. The third type of movement happens when there's no food around. And we generally call this migrating motor complex. And this is basically cleaning up house. So this is like peristalsis, but it's a very, very slow peristalsis. To do one cycle, it takes about 90 minutes. And basically what's happening is just one kind of large wave of contraction slowly moves down your whole GI tract. That's what this picture is showing. Slowly moves down your GI tract like that. And it's just pushing whatever's left over through your GI tract. You don't want stuff sitting there forever, right? So this could be stuff like random bits of food that got left behind. This could be bacteria that could be sitting in your GI tract, things like that. And so we have these pulses that happen once every 90 minutes that kind of push things towards your rectum. That's why sometimes when you're sitting at home and you're like, oh, I feel fine, and all of a sudden it's like, something's not right with my stomach. That's because the migraine motor complex is kind of helping things move along. And that's how we kind of keep the GI tract kind of clean of stuff if you're not digesting. Because you're going to see a lot of the stuff that happens only really happens when we're about to eat. A lot of the processes we're going to be talking about soon only activated when there's food happening. Because remember, these are really expensive things to do. We're putting a lot of fluid there. We're putting a lot of enzymes in there. It'll be really expensive to do. When I mean expensive, I mean it's going to cost us resources, ATP, energy, water. And so there is a huge network of regulation of GI processes, and I'm going to give you it in a very large kind of panned out view of what's going on, but there's still a lot going on. So we have two different kind of pathways for when we regulate the GI. We have something called short reflex. What? It is hard color to see, especially on that side. Let me no longer use green. Let's use purple. We have short reflexes. And then let's pick another dark color. And we have long reflexes. Is that right? Yeah, it's better. Alright, so short and long reflexes are basically, these are control reflexes, like reflex responses that we've been studying for this whole semester. But the difference is, what scale are they happening at? If it's at the local level, so cells regulating other cells, so like stomach muscles regulating small intestines. Basically not using the brain to do a reflex, we call those a short reflex. But if it's using the central nervous system, if it's using the brain, then it's going to be a long reflex. But you may say, Dr. Nair, when you have local control, we don't call that a reflex. That's true, but the thing is, the GI tract kind of has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system. We'll talk about that. It is kind of like the little brain of the GI tract. And so we're going to focus on short reflexes. So short reflexes are often stimulated by a local stimuli. So that can be a whole bunch of things. That could be food in your stomach. It could be acid in your stomach. It could be something called distension. Distension is basically what it means. It's a fancy term of saying parts of your GI tract are getting stretched. There's also distension in your blood vessels. If you say your blood vessels are getting kind of stretched open, call that distension of the vessels. So these things can basically create a reflex. And these kind of lead into a system which we will call the enteric nervous system. Now, to tell you the truth, we are still learning about the enteric nervous system. It hasn't been discovered too long ago, and so we're still learning new things about the enteric nervous system and how it operates. But yeah, like I said, it kind of operates on its own accord. It takes stimuli, it receives them via, it has sensory neurons and receptors that receive these local stimuli. They have enteric neurons that kind of output a message, and they output messages to various systems. They can send signals to smooth muscle. They can send messages to exocrine cells. They can send signals to secretory cells in the GI tract. tract. And so a short reflex looks something like this. So there's some acid present, some distension, sensory neurons will pick that up, send that information to the enteric neurons, which will then tell smooth muscle and exocrine cells to do various things, tell secretory cells to put out material, and then you have digestion, right? You can have motility. Oh, let me see if I can fit this word in here. Motility. You know, you have you're going to have secretion. Here you can have what we call GI peptides. So this could be hormones, these can be paracrine signals, and these can also inform smooth muscle and exocrine cells. So by just having food in your system, you create a digestive process through the enteric nervous system mediating these responses. So you notice here we have a nervous response, and here we have an endocrine response, right? Sounds a lot like what the body does normally, right? But this is all encapsulated in its own kind of nervous system called the enteric nervous system. This is why we call it the little brain of the GI tract. But there is the brain, right? Here's the brain. And it does, pay attention, it does react to these stimuli, right? And so the brain can sense things too, right? It sees food, it registers the taste of food, the smell of food, and so by just engaging those senses of food, it can actually